Okay, well, welcome to our June 26th reopening 757 briefing. This marks the 14th. Obviously, we are going into phase 3, July 1st, next Wednesday. In addition to that, July 1st also marks the beginning of several new legislative laws that will go into effect July 1st. As we have been in the past, we will be joined by our statewide lobbyist, Jody Roth, hopefully, if she's online, and our own Jenny Crittenton, board member of Retail Alliance, as well as overseeing the Gloucester Main Street Preservation Trust in the quaint town of Gloucester. They will both be talking about legislative updates and details surrounding our current phase. And we're also fortunate to be joined by Misty Lineberger of Pixel Financial Group. She will answer any questions that you have related to finances and loans. As always, feel free to submit any questions via the chat box throughout the entire meeting. So let's jump right on in. And if Jody's not on the line, is she, Joey?
I don't think so, but we can go right into Jenny.
Let's go right on into Jenny then.
Okay, good morning. How is everyone? We'll dive right in. So I think everyone is pretty excited that we get to leap into phase 3 on Wednesday. And so we'll take a moment here and just walk through some of the changes that will occur in phase 3 that are lessening restrictions for everyone here in our business world and even social gatherings at home. So in fact, we'll start with that. So social gatherings, just real quickly, limited to 50% occupancy of the space or 250 participants. So this is going to now start to allow weddings to occur. And then of course, maintaining the social distancing that is still recommended and required at this time. Events that cannot restrict access to the general public should not take place. So think if you are planning on having some kind of an event, like for us, we do several in the downtown, we will have to do them in a ticketed fashion so that once they reach the 250 capacity, we have to cut ticket sales and make sure the general public doesn't just waltz in as they wish. Something too to consider if you are planning any kind of an event through your business that potentially does target more of an elderly population, they're asking that you just still hold off on that and not have those kinds of events. So then moving on, restaurant and beverages, and thinking food trucks and distilleries and wineries and dining and food courts and such, and even tasting rooms. And probably one of the biggest changes is that now you can sit at the bar. And a lot of folks have been wanting to be able to do that, and you can. As of phase 3, they do not have any particular occupancy restrictions as much as they have to still maintain social distancing between parties. So if you and your significant other go to a restaurant and sit at a bar, then 6 feet down is where the next party can sit. Or if you're at a table, it needs to be from the back of the chair to the next back of the chair, has to be 6 feet. So for some of our restaurant owners, that means they'll have to remove some tables or still keep those marked off. But at least now we are getting to a point where they're relaxing some of those. The biggest thing with that is to just be sure that the cleanliness aspect, so all of the CDC guidelines for cleaning in the restaurant, that you are abiding by those. And if you've got live musicians, that they are remaining at least 6 feet from your patrons and your staff. I would heavily encourage, if you're a restaurant, to go to a reservation system, only because I think that as we start to lessen these restrictions, people will start to feel more comfortable and they're going to come back out. And there's nothing more frustrating than showing up at a restaurant and someone saying, well, you can't come in, it's going to be an hour. So if you go to a reservation system, you may be able to, potentially alleviate some upset customers. Still thinking in terms of your employees and how you may arrange their work schedule. Still try to cohort those work schedules in shifts, so have the same people working with the same people. Now buffets will be open for self-service, but they have to be continuously monitored by trained staff at all times. And thinking about your serving utensils, things people are touching during peak meal times, make sure those are wiped down often. Hand sanitizer, hand washing stations for your employees as well as your customers. And then anything that is touched, thinking tabletops, hard surfaces, cleaning those every hour on the hour. Table resets, they would like to have someone dedicated to doing that and making sure that they're certainly cleaning their hands prior to doing that. If you're still offering curbside to go, and I would encourage you to continue to do that, just remind your customers that you are still doing that. We have certainly businesses that did a great job with the curbside to go and actually don't want to see that part of their model go away. So don't see it as dining in as not replacing curbside, but keeping curbside in place and reminding people they can still utilize that service as well. Otherwise, everything pretty much stayed the same. I will encourage you to remember that masks are still to be worn by your employees, and the general public is certainly encouraged to wear them. You should have signage up, and this is for any business across the phase 3 guidelines. That has not changed. But we do encourage you not to confront people in the general public if they walk in without one. We've had some businesses who have done that. It hasn't gone very well, and others have been fine with it. So certainly it's up to you, but just understand that you do place yourself at a bit of a risk for a disgruntled customer, an argument, or for someone to become abusive in some way towards you. So let's look at farmers markets. So farmers markets should continue their pickup options. However, people can come and walk through the farmers market. A lot of us really enjoy, particularly this time of year, being able to do that. Just remember 6-foot social distancing. And if you own the farmers market, to configure the pathway for your customers so that it mitigates any type of congestion or congregating points in the actual facility, or even if it's outside. Vendors or employees that are handling actual cash need to make sure that they are washing their hands in between each transaction. Certainly the coronavirus is easily passed through the transaction of actual dollars. It says to discourage vendor sampling, but it doesn't say you can't do it. So just be careful how you do it and make sure you're doing it in a very cleanly and healthy fashion. So brick and mortar retail. So retailers, again, we're encouraging 6-foot distancing still in the stores, keeping up your signage, but there is no limit on occupancy in this phase 3 guideline. So that's awesome. So anyone with a brick and mortar store, as long as you can social distance, you can have as many folks in there as you would like. Just remember in your checkout area to demarcate on the floor, still leave those signs. I'm sure you've got them on the floor that says, please stand here, we care about you, and 6-foot distance as you're reaching the register line. Gymnasiums and recreation centers, sports facilities, exercise. Now we've gone from being able to exercise outside as well as a small percentage inside, that now we can go to 75% of the lowest occupancy load on that certificate of occupancy, while maintaining social distancing at 10 feet. So this is one of those where we're at 10 feet, not at 6 feet. If you own the facility, they're encouraging that you place the equipment, certainly social distance apart, 10 feet apart, making sure you've got a dedicated employee that would, have the ability to go in and clean behind each use, and encouraging your customers that come in to be patient and to spread out as much as they can. One of the things that I did notice in phase 3, and I brought this up last week when we talked, was that the facilities in phase 3 for gyms and exercise, they've listed in the mandatory requirements that they should be screening patients for COVID-19 symptoms prior to admission. I would just make sure you've kept a very good log. if there's a way to work with an attorney that you may use for your business to develop a form that protects you the best way that you can. Because from our standpoint, I've talked with Kate and Jody about it from the liability standpoint, from the legal standpoint. You really, as a business owner, can't ensure that someone who walks through those doors does not have COVID-19. There's a lot of asymptomatic people running around. So it's really pretty impossible. And to actually place that kind of liability on the business owner, in my opinion, is wrong. So it's unfortunate that this is in here. This is certainly not a part of the guidelines we ever saw in the task force, but it's one that I think is of concern, and I would certainly recommend that you work with an attorney to at least give you a layer of protection as you walk through that possible process. The other aspects for gyms and fitness centers, that 75% occupancy also goes for classrooms where you're having like a fitness class, and instructors have to maintain 10 feet of physical distancing. Let's see here. Under that group exercise, if you're at a very, very large gym and you could actually fit 250 people in one of those group session rooms, then that's the most you can do, even if that's not 75%. I think most fitness centers we probably work with would be below that. Again, hand sanitizing stations. There are certain pieces of exercise equipment that a facility cannot use. So think in terms of the climbing ropes. Actually, one of my favorite things. I don't climb them, but I love to shake them. And the climbing ropes can no longer be used right now in exercise bands. These just because these are very difficult things for someone to actually really clean in between. We'll talk about swimming pools in a second, but if your gym has a hot tub or a sauna or a splash pad or a spray pool, those are still closed. Swimming pools, though, can operate under the swimming pool guidelines. So the swimming pool guidelines, basically indoor and outdoor swimming pools can now function at 75%. Provided that they have the ability to do 10 feet of social distancing between patrons, not of the same household. If you've got your kids and they're at the pool, they can certainly play together, but they just can't play with the neighbor's kids. They have to stay 10 feet apart. Swimming instruction, water exercises, again, trying to maintain 10 foot of social distancing where it is practical. And parents or guardians, you can certainly get in the pool and work with your children with a facilitator or a teacher in order to do that. Seating that's around pool decks, those are also supposed to be socially distanced 10 feet apart. So if you're laying out in the sun, you're going to be 10 feet apart from your girlfriend. All seating must be disinfected and cleaned in between uses. This is another sector of business where they are, again, making it a mandatory requirement that they're screening for COVID-19 as well and symptoms. And so this goes back to the same thing I pointed out with gyms and fitness centers. So let's see here, recreational sports, we probably can skip over that related to this call, but 10 foot of social distancing, 50% occupancy load, trying not to exceed 250 people seems to be the rule of thumb for that one. Personal care and grooming services. Again, we're staggering those workstations if you're getting your hair done, and those are 6 feet apart. Maintaining physical distancing between clients as you can, particularly in the waiting area. Obviously, when you're giving a service, you don't have to do that, but they still are asking that you and your client both wear masks for the same reason. So that's pretty much kind of stayed the same. Hasn't really changed a whole lot. Campgrounds and overnight summer camps, no gatherings of greater than 250 people in one location. If you happen to have a campground and you've got on-site retail or a restaurant or any type of food establishment, you now revert back to the guidelines that are under the retail or the food establishment. The campground piece is strictly literally to the physical aspect of the actual campground. Entertainment and public amusement. This one has been waiting their turn. So in phase 3, they finally get an opportunity to open. However, they're opening at 50% of the lowest occupancy and not to exceed 1,000 patrons. All private bookings for something like that are limited to 250 people. So this is what covers movie theaters, concert venues, performing arts venues, from a zoo to an outdoor outdoor sporting venue. And it also even includes things like bowling alleys, escape rooms. Now, I will tell you, there's a lot of discussion behind the scenes that there's some unhappy people with how they labeled the 50% and then capped it at 1,000 people. If you think in terms, if I'm a bowling alley, I can have 50%, no more than 1,000 people, but on Busch Gardens, and you're still saying I can only have 1,000 people. It doesn't seem to add up. It certainly wasn't handled in the same way that it was done for retail, where you could do, a 50% occupancy load according to your occupancy. So I don't know if it will change, but I can tell you there's definitively conversations that are taking place around that topic. So 10 foot, if you are a venue and you've got performers, 10 feet of physical distance must be maintained between the performers and the participants, unless they obviously are of the same household. Let's see here if there's anything that might have basically wrapped it up. Let's see. Yep, I think for what we're handling today, I think that wraps up the phase 3 guidelines.
So Jenny, in your opinion, we will stay in phase 3 until the vaccine?
I don't know. We were just talking about this in our office yesterday, and I said, I think phase 3 is going to last a while. And I think that's certainly because we are starting to see numbers creep up and then a couple leap up in some other states where they've, opened prior to us. So if I had to guess, they're going to probably sit back and watch a bit. So I don't know. I'll be frank with you and tell you, I hope not until there's a vaccine, because who knows, when that will be. And for some business models, that will, it'll put them out of business. You think about your larger places, your speedways, your amusement parks, places like that, they can't function, they can't cash flow whatsoever on 1,000 people. So hopefully, this is going to give, maybe a few weeks to see how we do, but I really, really hope and pray our numbers continue to trend downward. And I know, because this is the last phase, I did get that confirmed. There's no phase 4. Once phase 3 is done, we're back to normal.
So there's no incremental changes in phase 3?
Not that I'm hearing. Mm-mm.
Okay. I know that North Carolina's put a hold on phase 3. Is that our
I had
understanding?
heard that too, yes, because their numbers jumped, and I think Florida's jumped, and I think Texas, theirs jumped as well.
Okay.
Of course, we're testing more too, so, but, I think it's percentage, maybe not, number of cases.
I don't see any questions in our chat box. Do you want to touch on any of the legislative issues or new bills that are going into effect July 1st that may be impacting our members?
Well, there's so many. I would highly suggest that the members get on the labor calls. There was one the other day, and to be honest, I was smack in the middle of a massive project, so I was listening, but I wasn't able to take as many notes. I was hoping Jody would be on to recap a little for us today, but a lot of private cause of action type of stuff. So, where a lot of the bills that passed were in favor of more employee rights than employer rights. And there were a ton of those. I mean, it would take a whole nother call for us to potentially go through those. But there is a second webinar, I'm sure you guys will cover when
It
that
is, yeah.
yeah, coming up. And I would definitely sit on that. I think the biggest one to remember is that minimum wage has been put off a year. So we won't be dealing with that till May 2021. But I think, the larger ones, like I said, are these private cause of action where it's really important for business owners to understand what they can and cannot do related to not paying somebody a wage, or maybe positioning yourself safely to protect yourself from getting sued for something frivolous. And so I think there was like 20 of those bills. So it's a lot.
Yeah, we had the Virginia Retail Federation, which we co-own with the Merchants Association of Richmond. To Jenny's point, has been hosting a labor webinars, and the last one was this past Tuesday. The next one is actually going to be July 14th, and I'll tell you, there were close to 100 people on that call.
Yeah,
and they really went into the weeds, so to speak, on how all of these employment issues, new laws, are going to be impacting our members and businesses alike. So very, very informative. Okay.
it is. And that was a deep dive, and it's a lot to absorb. There's no doubt.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on, and let's welcome our next guest this week, Misty Lineberger, who is no stranger to all of our members and businesses. Misty is here once again to provide any updates about the application process, dates for filing, and what else you need to do right now concerning small business loans with the PPP and the EIDL. So again, please post any questions that you have in the chat box. And thank you, Misty. It's all yours.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm just going to go through a lot of the questions I've been receiving over the past week, starting with the PPP. I'm starting to receive a lot of phone calls from people who have said, okay, I've used up my PPP. I'm ready to start applying for forgiveness. And my message on that right now is let's slow down a minute, primarily because I'm still actually doing case studies on the PPP forgiveness calculations, because I want to make sure that I understand it before I help other people understand it. It's still a little bit ambiguous. They have simplified it to a point, but I find myself going back and double checking, and we have 10 months from the time you receive the PPP funds to actually apply for forgiveness. And with the new legislation, your 6-month deferral is now until you actually receive the PPP forgiveness. The application has been processed. I know a lot of you have contracts that say the payments are deferred for 6 months. I would call your banks and see if that's something that you can have changed or renegotiated, because the problem is it could take up to 6 months for the application itself to even be processed, which means a lot of you could be paying on these loans before the application is processed, which is why they made that change in the last set of laws that they passed. So that's something you need to be looking at. Another question I'm getting a lot of lately is, oh, does this mean now with the 24 weeks instead of the 8 weeks, can we go apply for more PPP money? No, nothing has changed there. All they've done is said that you now have more time to spend the original loan amount. And for those of you who applied and received funds before June 5th, you have an option to either use the 8-week or the 24-week period, so you can elect to use either. So just something for you to keep in mind. Now, there are some people who were not able to get the PPP for whatever reason. They didn't meet the timing, whatever. You do have until June 30th to apply for PPP funds. I believe that there are still funds left. So if you are interested in getting a PPP, that is still an option for you at the moment. However, the other thing you probably need to be looking at is something called the Employee Retention Credit, which also came out with the CARES Act, and we're only now really getting really good information on it. Last Friday, I actually took a class sponsored by the IRS, and the woman teaching that class is having a hard time understanding it, and there are still a lot of questions, but ultimately, employers, as long as you are an employer, meaning you have employees and you are not a governmental employer or a self-employed one-person show individual, you could get up to $5,000 per employee based on some qualified payroll. in terms of reimbursement. You get to apply it against your current employer portion of payroll taxes, as well as possibly receive it as a refund by filling out a form 7200. I did put a video out there. It's probably worth you guys going and taking a look at that, because for those of you who don't get the PPP, you might qualify for this. Those of you who do have the PPP, you already don't qualify, so it's not an option for you. Now, in terms of the EIDL, there's still not a whole lot of new information there. I am still recommending that everybody be really careful with it and put it into a separate account and make sure they're tracking what they spend that on, because there are restrictions on what you can and cannot do with it. They're not telling us what they can do about it yet, primarily because it just hasn't been in the crosshairs the way the PPP has been, but that's starting to shift. So I just want everybody to be careful with that and make sure you're not out there refinancing debt or purchasing assets with that money. I think those are the two most common questions I receive on what they can do with that money. It is not for expanding or growing your business. It's for maintaining current operations until you start to recover. And aside from that, we're just going to keep working on how we get that forgiveness going. Also, just so you know, a lot of the banks aren't even going to be ready to start accepting forgiveness applications until mid to late July. At least that's the information I have in my discussions with the banks. So kind of need to sit back and take a breath anyway.
Thank you, Misty. And I don't really see any questions in the chat box. So we'll go ahead and thank you again for that update. Very valuable information. I think the big thing we can emphasize there is you still have till a couple more days to apply for your PPP, and the PPP forgiveness has been extended out several months. So that's good. That's good support for our businesses. So I'm going to turn it over to Kylie now for any Retail Alliance updates. Kylie.
Yeah, I just want to remind people that, especially as phase 3, can continue for a while, and with the face masks, if you do need extra, please, for any small business owner, just contact us. On the screen, you'll see the pickup distribution points, or contact any of our membership people or any one of the staff. So even if you have some and you need some more, please, we do have quite a quantity that should last for a little while. So please contact us for that. We have a Strive coming up. We will send out details of that very shortly, but please save the date, July 7th at 9 a.m. and it'll go for about an hour and a quarter. So July 7th, and it is about online metrics. So all of this digital marketing that you've been doing and digital connections and engagement with your consumers, make sure that it is working. So we will be looking at the metrics and the analysis of all of that with one of our subject matter experts on that date. So please keep that in your calendar. And besides that, it's just all the resources that we have available. As Ray has said, this will be the last of our regular briefings, but if something does happen that we do need to do another briefing, we will schedule and let everyone know via our communication channels. Ray.
Okay, thank you, Kylie. So as Kylie mentioned, this concludes our COVID-19 briefings. We will host future briefings on an as-needed basis as we continue to move out of phase 3, hopefully. In the meantime, please follow us on Facebook for any updates, and be sure to reach out to your member advisors if you have any questions. Again, as a reminder, the Virginia Retail Federation will be hosting another labor webinar July 14th. That will be at 9 o'clock. And this is going to be focusing on the new laws that are impacting employees or employment for all businesses. I want to take this opportunity to thank Jody Roth, Kate Baker, Tara, Misty, and Jenny for supporting us, supporting you, our members, and small businesses as we have gone through these various phases of COVID-19, as well as the application process for for the CARES Act and all of the idiosyncrasies involved with that. So thank you, ladies. Thank you so much for your support. And with that, this concludes this 14th and final COVID-19 briefing. Be safe, be well, and keep on striving. Thank you.